Anyway, thank you very much. Can I just have a show of hands for those of you who are here for the first time? Where have you been all this time? Anyway, look, listen, as you can see from the leaflet, we've got some very good people coming up, and I hope you all come and take advantage, because it's only 5 quid or 10 quid, and you get to see 12, is it? When did you pay? And we've got some wonderful people. Trini Woodall is coming on Friday. Tomorrow we've got Anthony Beaver. If you ever want to know anything about the Second World War, that's the fellow. We've got Princess Eugenie, David Williams, Hannah Rothschild, next to Rose here, the Duke of Marlborough, Julian Fellows, Lord Grossman, who runs the Royal Parks, Richard E. Grant, Anthony Gormley, and Jimmy Carr. So, you know, a very good lineup. Anyway, today, will you please join me in welcoming the CEO of Fortnum and Mason, Ewan Venters. You're very lucky because he's bribing me with a most wonderful looking box of chocolate. And I've got 200, so I think there are about 120 of you. So when you leave, you can take a couple, but only a couple. Don't be greedy, all right? So that's the bribe. So will you take that over to the exit so that when they leave, they can take a couple? What was the what's the OSLMDMG?
Just where all the chocolates is from all different parts of the world.
Oh, there it is. Okay,
and the flavour.
And the flavour, okay. And he brought me 2 Scotch eggs. I'm afraid I've had one. But I am going to give this away to the person who asked him the most awkward question, okay? So it was delicious, fresh from the oven just 1 hour ago. And I can assure you it is delicious. Now, listen, Ewan, you are the face of Fortnum's. I don't know whether you know, but do you know how many years Fortnum has been going on for? Who would say 100 years? 200? 300? Well, it's over 300 years. I mean, it is extraordinary. It was started in 1707, which is extraordinary. But it also took them 300 years to renovate. The last time they actually renovated the premises properly was 300 years ago in 2007. You joined in 2012. So 5 years after they renovated it. So obviously whoever renovated it didn't do very well for 5 years. And you had to be brought in.
Less good.
You, of course, were then running Selfridges.
Yeah.
All the foods there and other things. And Selfridges, of course, and Fortnum's are owned by the Weston families, although different branches of the family.
Yeah.
Was there any acrimony about one pinching you from the other?
Yeah, I mean, it was an awkward time. It was very awkward.
For them, not for you.
Actually, it was quite awkward for me too.
Well, you were under somebody in Selfridges, but you're now being promoted to somebody under whom you have nobody. So.
No, but I was very loyal to, we talk about it as the Canadian side of the family and the English side of the family. And the Canadian side owned Selfridge and the English side owning Fortnum's. And they were, it was quite an aggressive, hire, really. They hired
I mean, they gave you a much higher salary.
Well, that aside, they hired a headhunter to go and find somebody.
But did you have a much higher salary?
And I had, proportionally the right adjustment, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a no-brainer for you to be leading an institution, as it were.
I think that's the point, isn't it? Is to go and join Fortnum's isn't just joining a business; it's joining a proper institution. You know, I always remember in the very early days of taking over, having the opportunity to meet His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, and he asked me, "How are you getting on in the job, Ewan?" And I said, "Well, sir, it's fantastic." I said, "Of course, it's not like running a business; it's like running an institution." And he said to me, "Ewan, I don't think you need to go any further. I understand a thing or two about institutions."
Yes, I mean, it's a national treasure, as it were, isn't it?
It is, and actually, the opportunity we've had, which is kind of really special, is that it is a treasure. I think people would be very sad if it wasn't there, but people weren't using it. And I think that's been, one of the biggest successes.
When you
over
say
the last-
using it, you mean the footfall?
Yeah, the footfall, the
What was
spend.
the do you remember what the footfall was when you joined and what it is now?
Oh, I mean, we could have, on an average week outside of, say, the high days and holidays of Christmas and the like, we might have 20,000 people going through the store. And today, an average week is about 65,000 people.
At Christmas?
No, this week, an average week. At Christmas time, we can have nearly 20, our peak day in the middle of December is 25,500 people in one day.
In one day. So have they increased your salary?
You seem rather
Since you
obsessed by
arrived.
salary.
Well, no, I mean, I just wanted to know that, you know, if you say yes, then that means that you must be right in claiming all these figures.
Well, do you know what's really important is that everybody in the organization is doing better. Yeah. So we employ 700 people throughout the year. At Christmas time, we employ 1,250 people. And every single person, from the doorman to the packer to the buyer, everybody is doing better because of our success.
What was the first thing you did when you first arrived on day one?
I ordered a new red carpet for the store.
What, in order to bring in and grease up to all the royals and famous people to enter?
No, the carpet was thread-borne. I mean, the carpet was...
You mean on the ground floor?
Well, across the entire store, but I mean, on the ground floor in particular, it was looking hideous. Yeah. And, you know, we had that expression in England, the shabby chic. Well, this was more shabby than chic. And I recall the management team saying, well, look, Ewan, the carpet's going to cost £170,000. And last year, we only made £250,000 of profit. So we want to hold off the decision as long as possible. And I said, well, hang on a minute, we're coming up to our busiest time of year, Christmas time. I joined in the August of 2012, and we were coming up to our busiest time of year. I said, surely we've got to look amazing. We've got to look at our best. And so we just proceeded to sign the bill and to get the carpet laid. And
but before you left Selfridges, did you bring a lot of expertise that you learned in the transformation of Selfridges? Because I know, we all know that Selfridges was also, in a way, a bit backwards until it was completely renovated. Yeah. And so presumably you had a kind of philosophy that helped you modernize, as it were, and to bring up to date another institution which was a bit sleepy and needed to come and meet the requirements of modern living.
I think, you know, and that is the job. It's how do you have the sensitivity to modernize, contemporize, make more relevant, and still at the same time don't alienate the very core fan base that, you know, have looked after you for so many years. And that's the job that, you know, had to be done back in 2012, but it's the job today. You know, as we progress further, as we do more things within the store, as we do more things out in the world, how do we make sure that people appreciate that the sensitivity of contemporization is done in a way that doesn't lose the history and the heritage? But you've got to look forward. You can't keep looking back.
Yeah, and I noticed that when you give an interview, you say that, in fact, Fortnum has always been innovative, and that you claim that it was the first shop to bring garlic to Britain.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence of that? When was that?
The 1950s, the garlic first
much
came.
earlier. I think garlic was brought in middle of the 19th century, but I mean, garlic was grown in England. In the Isle of Wight, for example, there was.
And well, so whether it was garlic or whether it was the scotch egg that you refer to,
the scotch egg apparently was first made in 1738.
1738, yeah. And the story goes that the Fortnum's was seen as a sort of staging post, for the last staging post in London for people, you know, for the aristocracy, for the landed gentry who were taking their horse and carriages, heading out of London to their country estates. And they wanted essentially a convenient meal that they could eat using their hand, and the Scotch egg was invented for that purposes. You know, a bit like the story of the Cornish pasty with the crimp, you know, for the tin miners, that they would take the pasty down the mines and they would eat with their dirty hands holding the crimp, and that way they ate clean food. So
but for the more genteel class, I mean, that's a large egg.
Well, that happens to be, but that was made for you, sir. 'Cause
Yeah.
I
So
know
in
you-
those days, they
you
were
like
much
Scotch
smaller.
eggs. They were, well, to be honest, you have absolute flexibility in what size. And in fact, nowadays, you have even greater flexibility in what you might
Do you have a sort of,
like, put in them.
like Asprey, I seem to remember, they used to have a room full of old stuff. Do you have a embalmed Scotch egg somewhere to demonstrate that in 1738 that was the kind of egg that...
Sadly not.
No.
And if we did, it was probably destroyed in the war. So.
Yeah. And anyway, you were also, and I mean, Fortnum's also claimed to have sold the first tins of baked beans, Mr. Hines.
Mr. Hines.
Is that right? as
Mr.
well?
Hines knocked on the door of Fortnum's and presented his wares, and indeed, I think
And a
that's
most extraordinary story of George Mallory, who, of course, attempted the assault of Everest in 1922. And what did he buy from you? Do you remember?
a whole array of provisions, including foie gras.
Yeah, 60 tins of quail's eggs from foie gras. This is the man who was trying to ascend Everest. And 4 cases of Montebello 1915 champagne.
Man of good taste.
A man of good taste. I mean, I don't know. Well, no wonder his body hasn't been found, I don't think. They
Well,
found his clothes, which came from Burberry, I gather. So there it is.
He's well pickled.
Do you think, yes, well, your food and the drink might have killed him, in fact. We don't know.
What evidence do you have of that?
I don't know, but then neither do you have any other evidence about bringing garlic in and the Scotch eggs. I'm very...
Well, then we're equal.
I mean, the legends, you go, and then is a good story, but that's what gives you the attraction. And obviously you've done a fantastic job. Your footfall has increased threefold. How about conversion rate? I mean, we are in the retail business, so out of 100 people, the conversion rate is how many actually come in and buy, because it's not good enough for people to come in. Has the conversion rate also gone up?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, today we operate in Piccadilly. Our conversion is around 38% on an average week.
Yes.
And that rises as high as over 60% when you get to times of year such as Christmas and Easter.
But you are very greedy. You want to open on Sundays as well.
Well, we do open on Sundays.
Oh, do you?
Oh, yes. yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
I thought it was against the law.
No.
When
When
did that change?
Oh, gosh. 2005 or something, I think. So
Really?
A while ago, yeah.
Well, I must be stupid. Do you get lots of people coming in on Sunday?
Huge. And in fact, I think that law today is that any store over a certain size, I think it's 5,000 square feet, are permitted to trade for 6 hours on a Sunday, but no earlier than 10 in the morning, no later than 6 in the evening, which in itself I think is rather outdated, because today in this in the multicultural society that we live in, Sunday has different meanings for different people. And I know that from looking at our CCTV cameras around our store, that there are people queuing up from as early as 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, waiting for us to open at 12 o'clock.
So why don't you open at 10?
Well, but then if we opened at 10, we'd have to close at 4. And the other trend in London in particular is that people like to shop later in the day. So I personally, I'm quite happy perhaps opening at 11 or 12, but I'd like to perhaps stay open until 8 o'clock in the evening.
How many
So
floors have you
the law
got?
does need to change.
How many floors have you got? 4?
No, 6 floors.
But I noticed that as you ascend, fewer and fewer people go to the floors.
Well, that's typical of a department store model. The ideal model of a department store would be a pyramid, where the as big as possible ground floor and then as small as possible. But we have one exception, and that's the Diamond Jubilee Tea Salon, which was opened by Her Majesty the Queen back in 2012 to celebrate her Diamond Jubilee. And we look after nearly 600 guests a day having afternoon tea up there. So ironically, the foot traffic is ground, lower ground first, less traffic on second, third, then a lot more traffic on
But
fourth.
why do you put the new restaurant on the ground floor when presumably the sales per square foot would be more attractive if that was also retail?
Well, of course, you've got this curious, it's actually a great question, because you've got this curious thing in Britain where people feel the need to have quick access into their restaurant space. Whereas in Hong Kong, in all parts of Asia, and America to some degree, people are very used to going into a shopping mall, finding their route through to a great restaurant, or going up 10 floors in a lift. But London is still, if you cast your mind back, do you remember when restaurants like Hakkasan opened? I mean, they were kind of it was a revolution at that time, the fact that you go into some dark basement off Tottenham Court Road to find what today is now an extremely commercially successful restaurant. And I think there's more and more examples of that. So I think there is a sensitivity over how far people might travel. But our new restaurant that maybe you're referring to, 45 Jermyn Street, which is exactly on the ground floor on the back of the store.
But I was very surprised that you can't get high tea, or whatever you call it.
But you can on the fourth floor.
I know, but
and people travel.
But for
that.
years you could get. I mean,
the choice that we had to make, though, it was that if you wanted to build a restaurant that could command a good lunch business and a good dinner business, then we felt that it had to move away from being this tea room. And so, both in terms of look, feel, design, offer, we had to create a more sophisticated environment. And as I said, besides, our tea salon on the fourth floor of the store is such a strong destination that we are taking. I think we now turn over almost twice as much as the Ritz do in afternoon tea, which would have once been seen as the whole.
Is it as big? It's about the same size.
It's more or less the same size, or number of covers, certainly.
Really? I better tell the Barclay brothers.
Well, I was with Andrew Love today, who sent his best to you, and
I saw the Barclay brothers. Who's this son of a bitch who's taking all the tea people from us? I find that your restaurant downstairs is not as perhaps full as you might want it, especially in the evening. Is that a hard slot?
Well, you know more than anyone, building the restaurant trades, you've got to be patient. We're only 14 months into the journey, and I think we're very successful on breakfast and lunch. I think dinner is operating around 60% of where we'd like it to be. But as every week, every month goes by, I think the trade gets stronger and stronger. And the trick in restaurant business, as you well know, is be patient. Stay true to what you want to offer to your customers. Stay true to quality. Stay true to service. And eventually, customers will find their way to you.
Well, I mean, you've got the Westons behind you. Most other people have actually gone bust by this time. But you have also done incredible new things, because you quite rightly said you've got to innovate. You now sponsor outside events. You now apparently run the ice skating at Somerset House. Is that a fact?
Yeah, just a little over. We don't actually run the ice skating, but a little over 3 years ago, we collaborated with Somerset House, and we are the primary sponsor for the ice skating through the November, December, January season. And they've had sponsors over the years. I mean, I think the most famous sponsor perhaps prior to Fortnum was Tiffany. But what Tiffany couldn't offer, which we can, is we've converted the whole of the west wing of Somerset House into a shopping, eating, drinking arcade. And people just love the experience, of the festive experience, which I think undisputably Fortnum's is kind of owns that space. Christmas is Fortnum's. And it's a very exciting experience. So for those who haven't been, I encourage you to go this year.
And you've got two new shops in King's Cross and Terminal 5. Are they doing well?
I think both fantastically well. And the significance of opening in King's Cross, which we did, I joined in 12, and we opened St Pancras Station, our shop there, in November 13. So it was quite a fast.
How big is that?
1,200 square feet. So it's just a boutique size. The significance of that decision is that it made people reevaluate their relationship with Fortnum and Mason. 40 million people a year go through St Pancras Station. 23% of them never intend to travel. They're there to shop, eat, and drink.
What, they go to the station and not get on a train?
No. They're there to shop, eat, and drink.
Extraordinary.
So it's essentially...
I mean, that's what, 14 million,
Yeah.
25%, that's divided by 4.
If you talk to Marks and Spencer, it's one of their highest sales density food stores in the country, because people who work in the area, who live in the area, are using it like a shopping centre.
But tell me, how do you know they don't get on a train?
Well, it's another one of those myths, David, that we just say and then No, they clearly do their numbers of foot traffic going into the station. They've got lots of cameras. They know how many people are using the train, so they can do this sort of stuff. But the point is this, and for us, whether that number is absolutely right or not, the point is we have a very strong local domestic customer who uses our shop, who uses the restaurant.
Okay, so how many people come through your shop a week? I mean, you say
Probably
65,000 in Piccadilly.
Piccadilly,
Yeah.
we're talking 5,000
Sorry,
people.
I'm being a shopkeeper myself, so I'm just
We're talking
trying to
about
get the numbers.
We're talking about a relatively, just in the few, I don't know exactly, but probably just in a few thousand people. But for 1,200 square feet, David, that shop takes over £5 million a year.
Right.
So on
So,
a sales density point of view, it's probably better than Piccadilly.
Yes.
But what it has done, and come back to that point, as a business decision, it made people think, gosh, Fortnum's perhaps is for me. It's not just for them over there. Actually, the cost of our goods, the cost of our products aren't so expensive. They're a bit more accessible than we thought. And I think that was a good early decision that brought back the love affair that Londoners have now with Fortnum's.
and indeed, everybody came from King's Cross going, where did they go? Up north?
Typically
Yeah,
to the
so
north.
they want to buy something to show off to people.
And of course, it's the land gateway to Europe. So you have an incredible number of French.
Are
and
you in the
Germans who-
Eurostar area?
No. We're on the land side. As
So
you
why
call
didn't you
it.
go on the Euro side?
Don't think there's any need really, and I think with the efficiency of the train service, you don't really need much time to check in.
How about
and-
T5? Are there millions of people who go to T5 not to go on a plane?
No.
How many people go through T5? It must be millions. I mean,
I think it's another 45, 50 million passengers a year, and growing fast.
yeah. And you're inside that
And we have
thing
a
that
shop.
we're all made to walk through.
We have, well, I don't know. I think T5 is possibly one of the smartest commercial airline terminals in the world, I'd say. I mean,
Yes.
it's an incredible experience. I don't think you're actually made, other than the security, which, but beyond that, I think it's a rather charming experience, really.
Just coming back to your shop, I mean, one other question, Chris, because, then you can grill Ewan more, is I find that going upstairs is quite difficult. I mean, your two lifts are very ancient,
Yeah.
and they're very slow. Why didn't you renovate those instead of the carpets?
Well, we will. I mean, there's a separate project running at the moment about how we could put in faster, bigger lifts in a different part of the store. We're actually architecturally landlocked by where those lifts are and the scale of them. So that's just one thing I've got to live with. But yeah, for sure, it would be great to improve the circulation across the store.
Did you alter the lighting since the renovation? Because it's very bright and white in the new main hall.
In some areas, David, we've improved, but the next big project is which we're doing at the moment, is we're reviewing lighting across the store. I mean, it's a big number to.
I mean, I always told the chief executive of Marks and Spencer that they can't sell clothes in white light.
Yeah, exactly.
It looks dreadful, especially when they're on the ceiling. All women do not like to look at themselves in clothes in white light, with a casting, the shadow over their face. And a bit better to sell scotch eggs, but generally, I just feel that your main hall is like sort of more like Selfridges than Fortnum's.
I'm not sure. I mean, red carpets and chandeliers and men and women in red coats and tails.
Are they still all wearing
They're
red coats?
all
and
very
so
much
forth?
there. So I think it's quite different, really, than Selfridge. I think there's a wonderful opportunity around lighting. It's interesting, our product design, which I think we're very proud of, our packaging and so on. It's interesting, as we open stores elsewhere in the world, and certainly when we open them in more contemporary spaces, you can see how our packaging can sometimes take a very different life in fundamentally better lighting. So it's a job to be done, but you can imagine in a building of our age and those challenges, it's not just a simple thing to fix.
During Christmas, I learned that you bring in 300 temps.
Yeah.
How do you dress them? Are they all in coats, tailcoats?
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
whatever?
They're dressed exactly as our full-time staff.
So you
are.
must have a storage of...
We have
of
a big laundry room, yeah.
really?
Yeah, yeah. And
How about fat people? I mean, do you have uniform for very fat people?
well, I think, yes.
Or
we
how,
have,
whatever they're called.
we have
what are they called?
We've got a rather
shop
good,
assistants.
we've got a rather good tailor who can amend clothes to whatever shape and size you happen to be.
Yes, I've noticed one or two of those people are very tight. I mean, buttons not being able to be done up and so forth. I hope you noticed that.
We're very, very hot on dress codes.
I'm sure, yes. All right. Now, I just want to ask you, not Fortnum's now, about you. You started off as all these wonderful story tells that at the age of 11 you started selling bread at home and so forth. But that was because your parents were making bread at home and you helped that family business to sell bread locally. Is that right?
Not entirely true, no. I don't know where that came from. It is absolutely true that my first commercial business I set up, I was 11, and it was in the bread business. But whilst my mother liked to make bread, my mother was in the medical business, and my father was an engineer. So there was no family business. It was something that
So you made the bread?
No, I love to make bread, but I actually, no, the bread that I sold, I contracted that bread in from a local baker. So I used to have a local baker that would make a delivery at the weekend, and then I had a whole set of customers.
11 years old, so you went off to the local bakery and say,
negotiated
can I
terms.
buy
Yeah.
your bread,
Yes.
and then flog it off to
Yes.
somebody else at a higher margin?
Yes.
And why did they allow you to do that?
Well, they were entrepreneurial, and they thought that I was an additional point of distribution. And so this is a weekend business, a Saturday, Sunday business. And that business I ran between the age of 11 and 16, nearly 17, and then I sold it. So I had 5 people working for me when I sold the business.
So you were a very precocious young man.
In 90.
Yeah.
I don't know about precocious, maybe just confident.
Yes. So I didn't realize that you were so successful by the age you were 16.
Oh,
And
right.
then you went and joined Sainsbury, right, to
Yeah.
to improve your craft, I suppose.
Well, I studied my hires, the like A-levels in Scotland, and the plan was to do what we were all conditioned to do, really, which was to find a place at university or college. And I was nearly heading to Heriot-Watt University to do business studies. And my mother read about the management training programs in all of the big supermarkets. So during the spring, I suppose, of '89, I went to apply and meet with the Marks and Spencers of this world and the Sainsbury, et cetera, et cetera. And in fact, actually, Harrods, not too many people know this, I went to apply for a management training job at Harrods. And anyway, I was very lucky. I had an offer from almost every retailer I applied for, other than Marks and Spencer. But Sainsbury was the one that was offering me a job in London. And so I headed to London
How about
in
Harrods?
August '89. They offered me a job, but they didn't pay. I remember my salary, it was £8,250 in August 1989, and Harrods were offering £5,500.
Wow.
I think they had the reputation then that you kind of, it was your honor to go and work for them, but it made quite a big difference.
Had Al Fayyad, was he the owner already?
I think it was Tiny
Tiny Rowland, even worse. Right, okay, well, there it is. But Sainsbury, that was run by John Sainsbury at that time.
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. So
What
very
did you
much
think
so.
of him?
I mean, one of the most inspirational leaders. I mean, he's
Yes.
in my sort of, top
Yeah.
5 of
Yes.
people who, absolute genius the man was. And he, tough, really tough. And I was lucky early on in my career to be the personal assistant to the deputy chairman of Sainsbury. And he was a non-Sainsbury guy, family guy, but John was the chairman. And so I spent a lot of time in my early 20s being around those guys. And I mean, that was my university education.
He was in charge of the citrus fruit, is that right?
I went on, when I left the office of the deputy chairman, I was invited to go into part of the business that I wanted to do. So, I was given a choice, really, where did I want to go? And I said, look, I'd love to learn the craft of buying. And so they said, well, if you do, understand it's a craft. Don't just take it on because you think it's a glamorous job. And they said, so in order to sort of get you ahead, we're going to send you out to Spain, and you're going to live there for 6 or 7 months, and you're going to learn all the skills of agriculture, growing, logistics, supply chain, relationship management. And I did that for 6 months or 6 or 7 months. Came back to London and then was given the job of citrus buyer, which, you know, this is 94, I think, 93, 94, something like that. And I was buying something like 160, 170 million pounds worth of oranges and lemons for...
How do you tell a good lemon or a good orange?
Gosh, wow. Lots of things, really, about skin colour, about
skin colour? That's
thickness.
discriminatory. Yellow.
Well, they all start green, and then they change colour. You know, you got thickness of skin, you've got varieties, you've got what time are they picked, you know, how long you keep them on the tree before you harvest them.
Then who tore you away from Sainsbury into Selfridges?
Another public company business, but privately, but run by the dominant shareholding was by a family called the Brakes family. And they owned a business called Brake Brothers, which is a distribution business that supply hotels and restaurants and pubs with food. And they were based in Kent. And they had never, ever had anybody at the top of the business that was sort of non-family. And they were making a transition, and they set out a search to find essentially, I became the commercial director along the way, to come and join their business and help them professionalize and help them set a course of direction. And I joined, they were turning over nearly 400 million pounds at the time, and by the time I left, we sold the business. In fact, during the time, we sold it from PLC into private equity, and then I was there and we sold it again to another private equity house. And today that business is turning over, I don't know, 2.5, 3 billion or something.
But with the initial prejudice against you, Marks and Spencer, did they ever try to get you back?
No, never. But you know, I so remember why they never offered me the job. I sat in a room in Edinburgh, Marks and Spencer, and they said, "What's your ambition, Ewan?" And I said, "To run my own business." And I can see the two guys now, as I recall the story, when they looked at me and thought, "You're not for us. You're going to come, you're going to get your training, you're going to learn your craft, and you're going to bugger off." And they would probably have been, well, actually, maybe they weren't right, but they were very conservative, very nervous about that. And anyway,
if you were interviewing somebody and they said that to you today, what would you do?
Well, you see, I'd respect that. Life's changed. You'd see energy. You'd see lights behind the person's eyes, and you'd probably think, wow. They've got the chutzpah, they've got something about them that if you're lucky enough to keep them for 2 years or 3 years and they're great, then you'd hire them.
If you were such a clever boy, have you been approached by Bake Off?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, you know, you might win. I mean, you're so good at baking, and you know everything about food. So I suggest you might ask them whether they might pay you $100 grand to go and appear on the show. But anyway, look, listen, I've hogged you enough, more than the 20 minutes. So I want to let the audience ask some questions. Right? Who has got some questions? Who got a question? Yeah. Okay.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you for coming to speak to us. Hi. Thank you for coming to speak to us. My name is Tamara, and I just have a question about sales. You spoke about brick and mortar and foot traffic, and I was wondering what you're doing about online sales and how those are comparing.
Well, Fortnum's was probably the first multi-channel retailer in the world. We would have taken phone orders ahead of anyone else, fax orders, email orders. We were one of the very earliest adopters of online trading. 1998 was when our first transactional website went live, which of course seems just recent, really, but I mean, it was quite early. So, and we have a history of shipping product from Mallory, from the example that David gave, throughout the world. So today, online represents 20% of sales, and it's growing every year, 25.
How much international, how much
20,
UK?
25, 30%. The dominant number is UK. I can tell you that 19% of all of our online business, was originated from an IP address outside of the UK or delivery outside of the UK, which I think is a really important metric for us, as opposed to just simply what do we ship. Because clearly we get an awful lot of orders from people who live here who send gifts out to Canada or Hong Kong or wherever. And so I think what's very interesting is the number of people engaging with us outside of the UK and what that opportunity gives us. I think it's going to be phenomenal. Last year we delivered to over 120 countries in the world.
Are there so many countries in the world?
Well, I think there's about 180, I think. So
How many to Nigeria?
I'll come back to you.
Most of it, I should imagine.
Actually, not too much Nigeria. There's a bit of corruption in Nigeria. So
Well, that's what I mean.
yeah, exactly. There's a few
How many
places.
hampers do you send out? I mean, are they mostly hampers, or are they? It's a mixture of everything.
Mixture, really, yeah. No, fantastic.
Where do you make your hampers?
Where? In our own, either in the store in Piccadilly in the basement, or
Isn't
basement.
that expensive?
The majority, though, comes from our distribution centre, which is up in Cambridge. So we have
So they're all the wicker and all that.
Everything is
UK made.
wicker isn't. There isn't enough willow in this country, and there isn't enough expertise. There's not enough craft, which, by the way, I think is in itself the word craft. You know, I think one of the things that Britain in a new world needs to reinvigorate is craft skill around things like making hampers, making baskets with willow. So we have some very beautiful ones made in Somerset, but the balance of our wicker is made in China.
But I mean, what do we do with these hampers? I mean, I never know what to do. I mean, whenever I get a hamper, I just send it on to somebody else because you can't store it. And when you've emptied it, every year, what can you put in it? I mean,
Well, people use
don't you
them for
want to innovate?
Well, you raise an interesting point. So what do people do with them? I mean, people use them for baskets for kids' toys or blanket boxes or so any number of things. However, there comes a point, if you're as fortunate as you are, that so many people send you so many beautiful Fornum's hampers,
I don't have enough friends to give to.
then I think that it is an innovation which we need to figure out, where somehow you could create a sort of a recyclable,
Sell it back to you.
rewind, vintage collection of
Vintage
hampers.
collection, yeah. Well, I'm not so sure about that.
Why couldn't a beautiful basket made in a certain year attract the same value as a vintage Chanel handbag at some point?
Well, because nouveau riche don't like old things. They think if you're going to put any food in it, God knows where that basket has been. Basket case. But
Anyway,
there it
there is.
hygiene.
I respect your point, which there is something about people who do. But look, most of the world haven't had a Fortnum's hamper, so I think we've got a long way to go before we need to worry about that.
Yes.
Hello. Which Fortnum's product are you most proud of?
Gosh, most proud of. There's genuinely, I mean, the chocolates you're about to eat are extraordinary. And when you eat one of these chocolates, don't munch it.
Well, what do you do?
Break a
Stuff
piece.
it up somewhere.
Break a piece, put it on your tongue, and let it melt. And that's the moment where all of your senses will come alive, and you'll appreciate what good chocolate really tastes like. So please. do
There
that.
and there.
Hi. Speaking of looking forward, what is the project that's occupying you this week, small or large?
Sorry, I didn't.
What is this project that you're working on that's occupying your time this week?
This week. Well, I have to say, preparing to be interviewed by Sir David Tang has kept me fairly preoccupied. Actually, this week, one of the big meetings today was actually talking about the detail of our Christmas campaign and how it's going to look and how it's going to feel. Yesterday, we had a Christmas meeting where we've approved the designer who's going to do the scheme in 2018. So it's been a bit of a Christmas week so far. Both, and they're small and large, because the smaller one is what's happening this year, but actually getting our mind around what the future of Christmas might look in 18 and beyond is a much, much bigger project and expensive, because you're committing a lot of resources to design time and creative time.
Over there, and then to the front. Yeah. Who's got the? Yeah. After
Catherine,
you,
yeah.
just hand it in the front.
As somebody at the high end of the retail therapy for us, does the word Brexit fill you with horror or with excitement?
Well, I'll say up front that I was pro-Remain. However, decisions being made. Fortnum and Mason, has survived for 310 years. We'll survive for another. We'll prosper, not just survive. We'll prosper for another 310 years. So no, I think that let's get on with it and let's make some great deals and let's do some good stuff and recalibrate and if the politicians are going to get in the way of all of this thing. If it was left to David Tang and myself and a few other people, we'd be okay. So, but that's against the background, by the way, that I thought that perhaps some of this stuff wasn't. I'm more worried about what happens actually to our union as a result of Brexit than I am about Brexit itself.
Are you a closed shop? Is Fortnum? Do you have unions in Fortnums?
No.
Yeah.
So I'm more. No, the union, as in I fear that Scotland will try and break away.
Oh, you mean the British union?
The British union.
Oh,
yeah,
I thought you were talking about.
No, I fear more about
Labour unions.
No, I fear more about. That's my biggest fear about what Brexit may or may not do, which I don't think this union of the United Kingdom
might break up.
Yes, and I think that would be a very sad thing.
Yeah. Well, the Scots are always trying to move away, but. As far as I'm concerned, the sooner they do, the better.
Okay,
the problem with Scotland is that nobody wants to stay there. I mean, all the most successful Scots are always immigrants, to other countries.
Great explorers.
Nobody wants to go there.
Great explorers.
I mean, it's completely depleted of people.
What was the year of the Act of Union?
1705?
Or 7.
What?
1707.
The same year, 2 years
same year
of the same year of Fortnum's.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. Yeah. Stop asking me questions.
Hi.
2 years out was not too bad.
Hi, just want to know, is there any elements of the Fortnum and Mason brand that you keep that are loss-making just because it is key to the brand's success?
I'm not a fan of anything that's loss-making, to be honest. And genuinely, that's a great question because the business was essentially loss-making when I joined. It was barely breaking even, and in fact, in the 6 years before I took over, it had lost over £30 million. So, I inherited the mantle of a essentially loss-making business. So we're working our way through, trying to make every part of our business profitable. I just think that if you're in business, you're there to make money. And, you shouldn't tolerate any part of your empire, any part of your business that doesn't contribute. Now, therefore, some things may make a little less than others, and that's a totally acceptable thing. So, fact is that, I don't know, our second and third floor, our men's and women's business, will never be as profitable as our food business. But do they add to the richness of the store and the attractiveness of the brand? I think they do, and therefore we'll continue to innovate and do things around them. But my job is to make sure that the level of resources that go against that are appropriate to the levels of return.
But now you're very profitable. I think you turn over, 120 million and make perhaps 15 million pounds? More, perhaps?
A little bit more, but yeah.
Yeah, what was your bonus last year?
Not enough.
Not enough. There and then there. Come on.
I was going to ask, what percentage of sales do the food and restaurants have to the rest of the store?
80%.
It's 80% for food. And what about, is it a tourist destination more so than
60% of our business is UK domestic.
UK domestic? Okay.
Of course, with that, doesn't mean to say that they're British or English, but people who have a London or a UK address, and 40% therefore international. And that's a complete switch from 5 or 6 years ago. It was the other way around. 60% was international and 40% was domestic. And that was a very deliberate strategy to do what Fortnum's has always done, which is that be the grocer to people who are like good things, who have discerning palates, who are curious, who are interested in the origins of food and the quality, the authenticity. And I hope that's what we've we're managing to achieve today.
Are there more Americans or fewer Americans since you arrived?
I think it dipped, when you looked at the international profile, Americans dropped to 7, 8 in the list. Starting to change. We now see, I think, our American customer base up in the sort of number 3, number 4.
I would have thought the Americans would love the coming. I mean, it's an extraordinarily low number.
But if you think about over the last 5 years, you know, Britain's become, you know, with all the political situation and with security fear, you know, there was, which president, Trump, I think, was it Trump who said, you know, don't go to the UK, you know, and all that nonsense with you know, or through the presidential, election. So I think the Americans have been quite susceptible to media opinion about coming to the UK. I think that's changing. And actually, because of, back to the Brexit question, because of Brexit and because of the collapse of the pound, the relative collapse of the pound, I think there's people all over the world who are thinking, let's go to the UK this year. And we are going to see a bumper spring and summer in London and across the United Kingdom with people from all parts of the world. I've never seen so many Mexican customers in my store in the last 3 weeks.
Well, they can't get back. There's a war, isn't there? Yes.
I always love passing your shop and looking at the lovely...
Don't pass, do come in.
I do come in as well, I really do. And I love the way you decorate your windows.
Thank you.
Is that terribly expensive? And do you do it internally, or do you get other people to come in?
Well, we have a very strong internal team who actually make it happen. I suppose nowadays we're using more and more creative agencies to kind of help, you know, develop the idea and the thought process and perhaps the building of some of the props. But yeah, no, yeah, we're talking a couple of million quid a year we're probably spending on our windows. So I mean, you know, if you were out just to make money, you know, you would cut that by half. But you know, we would lose the charm. And my owners, the Westons, are very, you know, they've owned it since the 1950s, and they entrust me and the team to do the right thing by the brand. And part of that is the experience of the windows. So we protect the money that goes into, in fact, we've probably in real terms invested more than ever before. And I think they are, thank you. Well, no, I think they're utterly charming and wonderful.
Get into the store, for God's sake. Don't pass it.
Or shop online.
There's a doorman on the side street, but there isn't one on Piccadilly. Why is that?
Well, you can't legally stop a limo outside on Piccadilly, so the doorman is focused on where the...
I thought the doorman was for everybody entering the shop, not just for the toffs.
Actually, from time to time, I think in the summer we perhaps have two doormen from time to time, but David, who's the main doorman, is on the Duke Street door, mainly because of the limos.
Yeah. Go on.
Hi.
Hello.
Again. I was wondering, do you like using social media, and how much time do you spend on it each day?
Well, I don't know I could define how much time, but yes, I think social media today is an extremely important part of communicating to your customer base. And I liken it to the modern day shop floor. So as a shopkeeper, as David will appreciate, you know, spending time on the floor, talking to customers, engaging with your staff, engaging with maybe some of your suppliers, is really important. So I think I think social media, whether it's Instagram or Twitter, is just basically the modern day shop floor. It's the ability to communicate, and people tell you what they think, good and bad. And I'm always charmed by when somebody, you know, tweets you or something, sends you a message, and you respond, and the first thing they say is, "Oh my God, I didn't think you'd respond." You know, and I think, well, why wouldn't you? I mean, why wouldn't you? So it's important.
So if I repost a picture with you, which I took earlier, would you like it?
That's the easy bit.
Just leave your number.
Could I just ask you two questions? One, the team that you inherited, your executive team in 2012, how did they take the journey that you've been on? And secondly, do you offer the same sort of program that John Sainsbury's offered you now for Fortnum's for university and school leavers?
Well, 34 of the senior team who I inherited left within 4 months. Those that remain, most of them are still there today, and they're having a blast, and it's great. So we made some big changes fast, which was necessary. In terms of the future, yeah, I mean, today we've got the Fortnum's Academy. We employ, I think, nearly 29 or 30 something, 29 apprentices. We've got an internal management training program where we're identifying smart talent. We're investing, I think, well, I shan't. We're investing quite heavily in training and development. And you know, my absolute fundamental belief of running a business, it's the magic of people that count. And you know, we'll only be successful. Yes, we've got to have great product. Yes, we've got to have customers. Yes, we've got to have, but it's the magic of people within a business that will give us longevity. So I would like to think that we are giving people those opportunities. And age, you know, beyond age. I was making a speech to the staff the other day, and I said, this, you know, our apprenticeship scheme, we have a wonderful lady called Rita who's on the chocolate department. She's 86. I said,
86?
Rita,
Which department?
On the chocolate department. She packs all the chocolates for customers, and you know, Rita could become an apprentice if she wanted. I think she'd probably rather not. But you know, the point is, it's not just about young; it's about talent. It's about great people.
I think Lord Sugar would sack her. But yeah, extraordinary. How many years has she been?
Actually, here's the surprising thing: only 15 years.
So she joined at 71.
Yeah. So, you know, you kind of imagine somebody who's been there for 50, 60. We've got plenty of people who have been with us for, you know, 20, 30, 40 years. But our age demographic of our staff is surprisingly young. I mean, the bulk of people are sub 40. So
the 34 people whom you inherited, did you fire them or did they just leave?
Well, you know,
They couldn't have left in 3 months altogether, so
no,
you must have fired them.
I have an expression where we had a walk around the car park.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. I mean, it sounds rather sinister to me. All right.
Hello. When it comes to stocking like a new brand or product, what is it, like the key aspects that you look at in terms of it?
Well, it's everything's got to be about authenticity. It's got to be a great product. It's got to have an authentic story. It's got to have integrity. I think that you know, it's easy as buyers to be allured by something that you think that's just going to be, you know, kind of sexy and interesting and press-worthy and glamorous. But I think what Fortnum's is about is being expert editors, being great curators, and making sure that when we go out to market and we see things have got to be authentic. We've got to be able to stand by them. We've got to have the integrity. And I think that's what our customers expect of us.
Hi. Do you plan on expanding your business abroad and in different countries, like building physical stores in different countries? And if so, would you sell the same products as you would in the same stores that you would in the London and British stores?
How old are you?
11.
Perfect. Are you selling bread?
No.
Thank you for your question. I think it's an absolutely great question. Our international strategy is less about standalone stores, and it's much more about what we call shop and shop. So we're creating little boutiques within some of the other great shops of the world. And you know, one of our most recent successes has been in Hong Kong with a departmental store group called Lane Crawford, who are, for those who don't know, they're probably like Selfridges of Asia, very fashion store orientated. And we're doing a great job with them. And essentially, the range is core product. So it's tea, biscuits, and jam.
They're doing well in Lane Crawford.
Phenomenally well. I mean, it's so amazing. But, for example, with Lane Crawford, we developed a special tea to celebrate their 125 years old or something. So we'll occasionally tailor things, blends, recipes, occasionally to the market that we operate in, but more for promotional purposes. I think what I would say is that, you know, our Royal Blend tea is so good that we want the rest of the world to try it. Later this year, we're hoping, it's not 100% announced yet, but we're hoping to open in Seoul in South Korea.
Where?
In Shinsuke in South Korea.
Seoul, correct, yeah. How about Pyongyang?
Well, I hear you posed with the leader, so...
Yes, so Hong Kong is already there, so other shops as well. But I tell you, the problem with having tea in Hong Kong is that you can have wonderful tea, but the milk is horrible in Hong Kong. And it's a real problem. You cannot have a proper cup of tea in Hong Kong.
Or
because
have
the
a
milk is so...
Or have a blend of tea that doesn't really require milk.
So you should really think about importing fresh milk. I mean, it is not a joke, but I mean, you import we now import every organic stuff. It's the milk. All the cows across the border are fed on the most horrible things. And the milk simply doesn't taste like milk. And I can never enjoy a cup of tea. That's why I hardly ever have a cup of tea in Hong Kong. So Lane Crawford and you should think about that.
What are the worst and best commercial decisions you've made, and what have you learned from those? Do you resent making other people very rich? And if so, do you still have the ambition of working for yourself? And if you do, what business would it be in?
Gosh, there's a few questions.
I'm after the egg.
Number one, the worst decision, the best decision.
And
are you jealous that the Westerns are taking advantage of you, enslaving you? And fourth, when are you going to give him your notice?
Not planning to give my notice. Westerns are, they're an incredible family because they invest in the long term. And actually, part of investing in the long term is investing in people. And therefore, I and others certainly don't feel hard done by the work that we do and the reward that we get. So, no complaints there. Best decision, I think, was opening St. Pancras Station, which I've touched on already. I think it was a really great light bulb moment for the brand and for how people would connect and feel about the brand.
Was it because they told you that 2.5 million people do not go there to get on the train?
Well, do you know that? I think there was two facts. A, it was quite interesting, the statistic around how many people are there to shop, eat and drink, not to travel. Secondly, I think the dynamic nature of that part of the city is really exciting. That sort of northwest London area, I think is really, the Crick Museum.
But it's a nice surprise. It's a serendipity for people to come to King's Cross.
Completely.
Which has got the highest density of prostitution and see Fortnum.
Well, I don't know if that's entirely true nowadays. I mean, I think
in London it is. It's a well-known fact.
Is it?
Yes.
Still, well, I'm not up to those facts too much, but I think it's a pleasant surprise. You're quite right. There's an element of surprise, unexpectedness that we're there.
And the worst decision.
Worst decision. I'm not a big. I'm sure we've made mistakes. I'm sure we don't get stuff right a lot. But I genuinely, my management style is that as long as we learn, as long as we move on
When
fast.
have you been the angriest in the last 5 years?
I get cross when we run out of stock.
Yes, that is the cardinal sin.
Isn't it, Jeff?
It is a cardinal sin. To
or
run out of stock is a cardinal sin.
Or I get cross, we had a customer who was sort of a charming story, and a customer who wanted a hamper delivered to Miami for Christmas Eve, and we failed to get it there. And I got involved, and I thought, and I felt, I felt sick that this hamper wasn't going to make it.
On the hamper.
And then I said to the chap, I said, this might sound a silly question, but when do you want the hamper? When do you need the hamper? Is it Christmas? Oh, no, it's a New Year's party. I said, okay, so where are you going to be in the next 5 days? He said, well, on the 28th, we'll be in the Bahamas. I said, don't worry, the hamper will meet you on your boat in the Bahamas. And we made it happen. Probably cost us an absolute fortune, but we made it happen. So I get angry, upset, cross about failures to deliver on expectations, as opposed to sort of bad decisions, because I just think that every decision's a decision, and you just learn and move on if they don't kind of work.
Hi. What advice do you have for aspiring food entrepreneurs?
Well, I think...
you just heard his story, so just emulate him. Next question. Yes.
Hello, thank you. I'm Sonia. I run a production company, a TV production company. And I just wondered. Sorry?
Knows the answer.
Knows the answer.
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
Okay, I'll sit down.
We're never going to do a TV program about Fortnum's on.
Okay.
Was that going to be your question?
It was going to be the question.
No,
yeah.
never going to happen.
Okay.
Never, say never. I mean, my wife is going to ask you a question.
Lady time.
And what do you do with food that's expired?
Well, great question. Well, first of all, we're blessed with the fact that we've got 6 restaurants in the building. So actually, food that is nearing its expiry date, our principal job should be to convert
Serve
it
it
into
to the customer quickly.
Convert it into a pie. Convert it into stuff.
Oh, I'm not going to have any pie coming to a restaurant.
Number one, because of course it's perfectly safe, perfectly healthy, and not an issue. However, on a more serious note, we are in a significant partnership with a charity called the Felix Partnership, which some of you may have read. The Evening Standard are big supporters of it. And Felix are quite unique because they've got the infrastructure to pick up fresh foods from shops and restaurants and get it to the people who are in most need across London. And there's a number of charities like them, but they only deal with grocery products, with shelf-stable products, whereas they deal with fresh. And we bought a vehicle for them. We provide practical help and support on people, etc. And any of our food that's heading towards running out of code or being wasted now goes to through the Felix network. So very, very, very important and very personal to me, the whole subject of waste food and management.
The problem is that apparently there's a health and safety problem about food which have expired and which are actually dangerous. I mean, you can't really tell, but that's the problem, is that people are not, you don't want to give it to people in the street because
well, that's right.
That problem.
And that's why so much fresh food waste. I mean, in this country, we waste 11 million tons of food in the UK. I mean, it's a scandal. I mean, if you truly thought about the world oversupply of food and the waste that goes on, we don't need any aggressive GM growing program because we can feed the world's population growth for the next decade or two just by simply managing our waste. I was involved in a fundraising exercise 2 weeks ago, which actually Sir David very kindly supported me on, with the Jamie Oliver Foundation and with UK Harvest, to raise money for education programs to go into schools, hospitals, community centres, and train people on how best to manage food waste and how to eliminate it and how to improve diet. And we had it was called the UK CEO Cook-Off, and we raised over £500,000 that night, which was phenomenal. And so I think it's a really important
But
subject.
isn't it much easier if you just don't make too much food?
Of course it is. Absolutely. That's where you have to start from.
Why didn't you make less food? Not
I mean, our conversation in our board meeting and in our management meetings is, of course, yes, we want to give Felix as much as possible, but the real success will be give them nothing because you've got nothing to give them. Yes. But that will take time and awareness and education.
Right, we've got to be very quick with 2 or 3 quick questions. Yes.
How do you get your staff to engage with your message and vision, and how do you get that message across to them?
Well, in a number of ways, but one of the most practical ways is on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, we have something called Good Morning Fortnums, and everybody who's in the business at that time come together for a 15-minute briefing. And that briefing will be led by myself or one of my board colleagues. And that's an opportunity for us to convey very quickly what's going on in the business, what's important to us. So that's a very practical, very quick way. We have a whole other medium of communications, from newsletters to listening groups. I chair a listening group every month where we have a cross-section of people from the business come together, a cup of tea, spend an hour with me talking about. So you never get there with communication. You never get there. So you just got to accept that every week you've just got to try harder and
How many people do you employ? How many?
750 on a regular basis, up to 1,200 and something at Christmas time. So
750.
It's a decent number of people, It's
well, they're all in a shop.
Majority are Piccadilly. I mean, you've got a few out at the distribution centre and a few.
No
at
wonder it's so
Heathrow.
crowded.
Hi. How do you compare your multi-site and international strategy with some of your competitors who pride themselves on being British locations and maybe even only one store?
I don't know. I think we're not trying to emulate what we do in Piccadilly. That's the key number one point. So where we do go out, the satellite business, as I sort of call it, you know, whether it's Heathrow, St Pancras, or the shop-in-shop concepts around the world, they're providing a convenient solution, a signpost, a representation of the brand. I think if we were trying to create mini Fortnums around the world, we'd fail, and we'd look foolish, and it wouldn't really work. So I think the satellite concept, I feel we protect the integrity of Fortnums and Piccadilly through the support of the satellite structure, plus, and most importantly, online. Because actually that's probably the first face of the brand across the world that most of our customers will interface with, and therefore the time and effort that goes on to making online look fabulous and well is really important.
Okay, one last question. You've already asked, so we'll let this fat one. You're going to ask the question. Yes.
When I was young, it was always said that Fortnum and Mason made their money from tea. What percentage is that now as your business? Is it significant?
Yeah, I mean, tea and hampers are the two biggest categories. So yeah, it's not changed too much since then, really.
Quickly.
What percentage of senior management are women?
I'm very happy to share this number with you.
And what advice would you give, what leadership advice would you give to women?
Well, the board is 50-50, and the senior management team, and we're talking kind of jobs, you know, £35,000 and above, 71%. So we are, if it's important, which I think diversity and the like is important. But having said this, and I won't be hugely popular in some circles for saying this, it's about talent, It's about the right people. Black, white, male, female.
And I think it's very tiresome for women.
I think the agenda at the moment is going too much towards, you know, quotas and all that stuff. I think we'll be in a bad place. So I'm very proud of what we have. I think we've got a diverse team. We've got a really lovely, healthy mix of boys and girls across the business. It's great. But I do think it's just the best people.
Well, how about transgender? Do you have anybody there?
We do.
How many? On the board?
No, not on the board, no. But there are...
What's their name?
I think there's about 3 people in the business that are...
Really?
Strictly speaking.
Yeah. How do you know? Well, there it is.
Leadership advice is what probably what I've just said, is just be good. Just be good. Just don't tolerate, don't accept, you know, just be able and confident at the narrative you need to get across.
You are under pressure to have a balanced gender. That's why it's not accidental you have 50-50. I'm sure that at some stage you say, somebody's going to ask me.
Do you know, I recently hired a new people director, an HR director, and I must have interviewed 5 men and 3 women for the job. And the best person got the job.
Who was a woman?
Who happened to be a woman. But I can assure you, my new commercial director that's just about to join us is a woman. And that's a job that typically, there would be more men would typically go into a commercial director's job.
You insist they wear high heels, as some companies do.
Do I insist?
Yes.
Of course we don't. No.
Okay. Well, I'm going to first of all give this scotch egg to the boy whom I cut short, because he was asking you advice. And if you eat that scotch egg, you might like to reproduce it and sell it to other people. Finally, I just want to, I don't know whether you know, but you were born in Dunfermline, weren't
yes.
you? And of course, I know that you're a great admirer of the monarchy. You know that the Queen has a horse called Dunfermline. Who had a horse, who won, it was one of her best horses, who won the Oaks and the St. Leger in 1977. So next time when you welcome her, you might smuggle that in, because I think that will score a couple of brownie points, and you will be smiling even more than a Cheshire cat, which I've caught you looking every time she arrives. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we have actually gone over 10 minutes, which we hardly ever do, but that's because of your interesting questions, and all of you deserve a cup of chocolate, and don't forget, do not crunch it. Put it in the tongue, then let it melt, and then enjoy, okay? But ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in thanking Ewan.